Lawyers are not doctors. Shocking to hear, I know, but they are smart and they know they're not medical experts, so they require help understanding the medical issues involved in a negligence lawsuit. So they seek the opinion from experts, us. Today we're going to discuss the important role of the medical expert in negligence lawsuits and reveal some easy documentation tips to make their life and your defense much easier. Now, despite what you see on TV, the expert doesn't have to be an internationally renowned researcher with a 3-foot thick CV. A real expert helps the lawyers understand what happened during the case of the patient, the prognosis, and also their outcome. Their opinion is based on what a reasonable standard of care at the time of the event and provide an opinion on whether that care was breached, all done in layman's terms. This means that the expert witness can be any reasonably experienced physician with knowledge in the area who can explain the issues. Because of their importance, expert witnesses are involved in a negligence lawsuit from the very beginning and by both sides of the case. Their role is so important in a lawsuit that without evidence from an expert witness, the court can't make a decision. In fact, if the patient can't produce a witness, then their case will probably just be dismissed. The other type of witness that is commonly seen is called the fact witness. These are a different type of witness. They can only testify to what they saw and heard. So think of the case of a witness to a bank robbery. They can only testify about who and what they saw, not the internal motivations of the robber itself. Expert witnesses can go beyond providing basic information to help the court understand the issues at hand and state their opinion and conclusions. Even though your lawyer will hire an expert witness to review your care, the court expects her to be an impartial in her opinion. The court also expects her to be true to the profession, be objective and independent, refrain from acting as an advocate, avoid bias, refrain from giving a legal opinion, and avoid judgmental or pejorative language. So what does this mean for you? Well, the expert witness is hired by your lawyer and will review every aspect of your care from the medical record and all of the transcripts from the questioning. The expert will never, ever get a chance to talk to you directly. In fact, you'll never even know who that person was. So in order to help you defend your excellent care, the expert witness needs to be able to make sense of what happened and why you did what you did. This is why your documentation in the chart is absolutely critical. Now, after surveying several expert witnesses, I've come up with 8 easy ways in which you can improve your documentation and make your defense just that much easier. Number 1, notes must be dated and timed. Now, I can't believe that I have to say this, but apparently some people miss that day in first-year medical school. All documentation in the chart needs to have the current date and time. Just the date alone is insufficient because the date and time establishes the sequence of events and puts your care into the proper place in the patient's story. Nurses will write the dates and times, so if you don't likewise, then the expert witness won't be able to tell when you did what you did. I mean, seriously, I can't believe I have to explain this. Always put a complete date and time down and use the 24-hour clock so that it's just that much clearer. Number 2, notes should be legible. And again, I don't believe I have to say this. To be perfectly clear, if you have ever been told by anyone that it is better to write legibly so lawyers can't get you, that person's a fool. Having a legible note is critical to the expert witness and also for you. Just so that you understand, during questioning, the lawyer for the patient will ask you to read your own notes. They will certainly also make you read anything that is difficult for them to read. Do you honestly believe that you will be able to interpret your scribbles 4 years from now? Do you think struggling to read your own handwriting in front of an audience makes you look like any kind of a competent professional? Putting a little bit of effort now into making your notes legible will really pay off in the future. Number 3, notes should be contemporaneous or clearly reference when the event occurred. Notes that are written at the time of the event are always considered more credible than later notes, which could be viewed as self-justifying. These notes capture your thinking at the time, which is crucial in helping you understand why you did what you did. If you can't write a note at that time, it's perfectly acceptable to document later, but your note should clearly state that this is not contemporaneous and try to be as accurate with the times and sequences as possible. Do not try to make that note look like it was done contemporaneously. Write the current date and time with late entry. Number 4, notes should focus on explaining why you're doing what you're doing. The most important aspect of being a physician is decision making. Documentation should focus on explaining the situation as you saw it, the decision you're making, and the reason for that decision. Number 5, synthesize data into issues. You don't need to include a bunch of data in the note, especially if it's not relevant to the subject at hand. Like, why are you bothering to write down the calcium level or the normal chest examination in a patient with an ingrown toenail if the data is not part of the patient's problem? It is also unhelpful to write down isolated data points with no further explanation. For example, don't write down hemoglobin 61. It's much better to write anemia, why you think it happened, and what you're going to do about it. Number 6, write your note in a way such that both you and this anonymous expert witness will be able to understand what you were thinking at the time. Remember, this will likely be read 3 to 5 years later. As a test, look at your completed note and ask yourself whether this note will make sense to you if you're meeting this patient for the first time. Number 7, develop a consistent habit of style in your notes. This will give your overall documentation much more credibility. You can then use documentation shortcuts to make you more efficient, but you should be able to easily outline what that shortcut means. So, for example, my usual practice in the morning is to review a patient at the bedside, talk to the nurse, review the electronic record and all of the labs. Then my note for that day simply states, patient and chart reviewed at bedside rounds. If I'm ever questioned on what patient and chart reviewed at bedside rounds means, I can credibly explain what my usual practice is, and that's perfectly acceptable. Number 8, a good note doesn't need to be verbose to help you in a lawsuit. In fact, it is way better if they are brief and to the point. Consider that there are only really 3 parts to a plan for a patient's issue. A diagnostic plan if the diagnosis is uncertain, a treatment plan, and what you have told the patient or family. Each of these really can be done in a sentence or less. You can always add more if you need to explain more, but don't worry if your routine notes are short. A brief note, legible and well written, will help you infinitely more than a 5-page scribbled manifesto. Today we touched on the important role of the medical expert witness in negligence lawsuits. They are critical because lawyers recognize the need for an expert to explain the situation to them. They are also necessary to establish what the standard of care is and whether you met it. In order to help them help you, you need to follow a few simple rules when you're writing your notes. Date and time it, make it legible, and focus on explaining what you're thinking so your defense will be that much easier. In the last video of this series, we're going to cover for most people, usually the final step in a lawsuit, questioning. Until next time.